Hey guys, Andre from High Performance Academy here for another one of our webinars. Now today we're going to be diving into speed density tuning on the HP Tuners slash GM platform. We'll see how we can go about performing a speed density patch that's going to allow us to remove the MAF sensor. Before we do that though, we'll actually talk about why we might want to remove the MAF sensor, because I know a lot of tuners kind of do this as a matter of course. Maybe they've come from the aftermarket ECU world where MAF sensors are very rarely used, and we'll find actually that in a lot of cases the MAF sensor doesn't pose a restriction, and if you understand how the MAF sensor works, they're actually not that scary and they can make our tuning a lot simpler. Before we get into that though, just continuing on with what's been going on around HPA Labs, we talked a little bit about our race from round 2 of the South Island Endurance Series the weekend before, and a few things that sort of went wrong in that race. Unfortunately wasn't ideal. You can check back in our YouTube if you want to get the update from that, but I won't kind of go over it again in too much detail. One of the things I found though, I jumped in around about the halfway point for our 1 hour endurance race, took over from Ben, and it became pretty apparent just about as soon as I left the pits that something was loose in the rear end of the car, and over a couple of laps I noticed that it was producing quite a serious clunk anytime I was off throttle and back on throttle, and kind of figuring out with a bit of a mechanical knowledge of the car what that kind of likely was going to be. It sort of seemed like it was maybe a broken diff mount or something of that nature. Didn't seem to get any worse. There was not really a lot of point coming into the pits, probably nothing we could have done anyway, so we kind of rolled the dice, decided to stay out, and got through to the end of the race. Managed to put in the fastest lap of the race, or at least for us, on the very last lap as well. So obviously wasn't hindering us too much, but of course we wanted to get into what exactly that was. We've got our third and final round. We're actually missing one this weekend coming because we're heading to World Time Attack. So our third round, actually the fourth round of the series, is in I think another 3 weeks time, so we've still got a fair bit to get through. We'll jump across to my laptop screen, and this is what was causing the ugly noise from the rear end. So this is the white line bush from the front of the diff, and this was in the diff when we purchased the car. Nothing actually wrong with the white line product. We've got them in one of our other cars, and they work really well. They're a nice compromise for a street driven car. They get rid of some of the flex from the factory rubber bushes, but they don't transmit all of the noise, vibration and harshness through like a full solid bush. I'll get more into that in a second. The problem is that this little guy here took a hell of a hammering, because when we first took over purchasing that car, we ran it at a couple of race meetings, and we didn't have a diff cooler on the car, and we were getting some insane temperatures in the diff oil. We don't know how hot it got, because at that time we didn't have a sensor. Probably a good thing. Sometimes it's better. What you don't know doesn't hurt you, but what we don't know definitely did hurt this diff bush. This diff bush here sits closer to the pinion bearing in the diff housing. The one on the other side is actually offset a little bit. So the upshot of this is that a lot of heat was transferred into this bush, which has resulted in this melting that we can see here. The other one over here actually looks pretty sharp. That's the one that was located further away from the diff. So actually basically melted the bush. There is also a little washer that's not visible here that kind of goes on the other side of this bush, and basically that got hammered out. So we're not really too worried about the noise, vibration and harshness, being that this is a race car. So we decided to take the plunge and just go straight to solid mounting it. So that's what we've got here. This is a solid aluminium bush that Brandon has been turning up. Well, that's one of them, and that just fits into the diff housing like this. So we're going to have 2 of those at the front there, which we can see, and then another 2 that come off the rear cross member, rear subframe, and mount to the back of the diff. Now, this is nice for a race car because it eliminates all movement of the diff and makes the car just a little bit more positive. There's none of the driveline lash taking up when you're on and off the throttle. So a little bit more positive. The downsides, of course, are that all of that noise, vibration and harshness is transferred straight into the chassis. And you might think this is not going to be too big of a deal, but we solid mounted the diff in our other Toyota 86 back when it was still regularly street driven, and it was horrible. The amount of noise that comes through with those solid bushes really is just horrible. So definitely not something that I would highly recommend if you are building a street driven car. Sometimes some compromises there in terms of the quality or the stiffness of the bush material that you're using do need to be taken into account. Obviously we're talking there about diff bushes, but exactly exactly the same goes for all of the bushes on the suspension arms as well. In stock form, they're going to be some kind of rubber bush material. They are designed primarily to locate the suspension component without unnecessary compliance, but really the biggest factor for the OE manufacturer is making sure that all of the vibration and harshness is taken out, not transferred into the car, because comfort is obviously key for a passenger car. What we find though, of course, out on the racetrack when we're pushing the car hard, is those factory rubber bushes do tend to deform, and what that means is that the alignment settings that we've got when the car's static in the workshop may be quite dramatically different when those bushes are being deformed under high cornering forces or braking acceleration. So just a few considerations there. Now our other Toyota 86, our Racecraft 86, I mentioned that Ben went to race the car on Sunday for a slightly different race meeting that was held at the same racetrack. In qualifying, he was looking good for P1 in qualifying for his class, and then ended up breaking fourth gear. Now I mentioned that, but at the time we hadn't actually pulled the gearbox apart to see the carnage. Always interesting to find out exactly how bad it is. So jump across to my laptop screen again, and here we've got the poor little fourth gear. So we're still working on a solution for this. I did mention this briefly last week, but essentially we've broken now 3 gearboxes, I think, on this car. So it's pretty clear that we're going to keep doing exactly the same thing if we keep feeding factory gearboxes into it. We're in a situation where we want to make more power with the car, not less. We've got our new motor still in the build here, which will have a closed deck block, forged pistons, forged rods, and we're aiming to really be able to lean on that EFR 6758 once we've got that in. Even that being said, we're still sitting just on 400 wheel horsepower with the stock motor, with the H-beam rods in it, stock pistons, etc. on E85. So it's not messing around, and unfortunately there aren't a lot of options available for gearbox upgrades for these cars. It seems that anyone with the ZN6 chassis who wants to make serious power ditches the FA20 straight away and either goes 2JZ or LS. So if you're going either of those routes, there's plenty of pretty stout gearboxes to put behind them. For the FA20, not so much. And for our Racecraft project as well, it's quite important, not just cost-wise, but for some of our content that we want to produce, we want to make sure that we keep an H-pattern gearbox. So going for an expensive sequential would be nice and it would be fast, but it's not really going to help our cause for sort of showing some of the driving techniques to home enthusiasts that really aren't in the market for maybe what it's going to be a $15,000 or more sequential gearbox. So at the moment we're sort of still toying with an R154 gearbox, which actually came out of our Black 86 when we fitted the sequential. That gearbox is plenty strong enough to handle anything the FA20 will throw at it, but it's kind of a little bit agricultural in its shift quality, and the gear ratios aren't ideal. Feels a little bit like rowing a boat when you're out driving the car on the track. It's also actually a really bulky gearbox, and that actually becomes problematic fitting it into the transmission tunnel on the 86 chassis. So that's one option. The T56 is another one that we're looking at, and just more recently it actually turns out to be more cost effective than we thought, looking at an option of a secondhand Quaife 5-speed H-pattern dog box. So then we get into the intricacies of fitting everything up to make sure that we've got the input shaft of the gearbox running concentric with the crankshaft. I've seen a lot of problems over my time where gearbox adapter bell housings have been made up, everything isn't quite right, and it takes a few thou of run out there, or a few thou where the input shaft isn't completely concentric with the crankshaft, and you end up running into problems with bearing life and seals leaking, etc. So we definitely don't want to get into that. Now I have talked a little bit over the last couple of weeks about Racecraft, our new project. Last week I announced that our first course, our Wheel Alignment Fundamentals course, is out. So I just want to take a few minutes out here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this course because we are really excited about it. And first of all, just to really be clear here, we've sort of branched this off from High Performance Academy because while there is going to be some crossover between people interested in learning how to build engines, tune engines and wire cars, we feel that the market for the Racecraft product, which is how to set up your race car, how to improve it, how to do wheel alignment, etc., and then we're going to be moving into data analysis and also race driver education, we feel that they are quite separate markets. So we're not trying to make out that these are two separate separate entities. It's very clear that they're being run both by us, and the feel and format is going to obviously be very, very similar. So we were actually down at the local racetrack, Highlands Motorsport Park, yesterday doing some filming for a little bit of a promo video, as well as a couple more modules that are going to be added into that course. And I just wanted to talk about what we were doing there. So this is a little device that I was using yesterday. I'll just see how much detail we can get here of it. This is called an Alfano tyre control PT, pressure and temperature, and these are pretty common. You'll see these being used by a lot of race engineers in right up to professional motorsport. And the idea behind one of these is it does two things. As its name implies, it can measure the tyre pressure and the tyre temperature. The nice part with the Alfano, I should say, is that it can also record all of that data. So you can take all the data really quickly when the car comes into the pits, record it, and then actually analyze or look at it in a bit more detail once you've got that and things aren't quite so hectic. So the idea here, I'm not going to talk about pressure because that's relatively self-explanatory, but what we've got here is this little thermocouple probe that's attached to the Alfano head unit, and it's got quite a sharp little spike at the end. And the idea with this is that what we do when the car comes into the pits, come in on a flying lap, we want to keep the car at race pace right to the entry to the pit, and when the car comes in, someone else is going to go around the car and basically insert this little probe into the tyre in 3 places across the tread width. And the idea is that we are measuring the temperature of the tyre tread, and this can help us optimize both our camber as well as our tyre pressure. Now, the reason that that little temperature probe is a sharp spike is what it allows us to do is actually insert it slightly below the surface of the tyre, because of course the tyre temperature on the outside of the tread will normalize very quickly. As soon as the car's off the corner, basically instantly that tyre temperature starts to drop back down and normalize. And what we want to do is measure just below the tread, where it takes a little bit longer for that to happen. So the idea here is that we're using that data to help us optimize our camber and pressure, as I mentioned. And what we're looking for here is a gradient of temperature across the tyre tread. Generally, because of the amount of negative camber the car runs, we're always going to end up with a higher temperature on the inside edge of the tyre, and that's going to drop away as we move towards the outside. So we can use that. We're aiming for a gradient somewhere around about perhaps 10 to 15 degrees C, from the inside being hottest to the outside being coolest, and that'll give us our camber setting. So we know our camber is going to be right when we've approximately got that gradient. The other thing we can do though is look at the center temperature, and what we ideally want here is the center temperature on the tyre tread to be basically exactly halfway in between the inner temperature and the outer temperature, and that will suggest that our tyre pressures are correct. Now, that's all well and good, and it's going to give us a lot of data. It's certainly a lot better than guessing, but unfortunately there are some problems with getting that data in so much as, actually, we'll just quickly jump across to my laptop screen here, because this has got a shot from yesterday that Scott's just sent me of me doing that temperature measurement in the pit. So Ben came into the pits there at the front of the car as well. To get access to the entire width of the tread, it is quite helpful to have the driver turn the wheel out, which is what you can see there, and we've just got that probe inserted. So as I was getting onto though, one of the problems with this is that we're going to see those tyre temperatures start to normalize basically as soon as the car is off the corner, and that's not really giving us a good idea once we get back into the pits of exactly what was happening out mid-corner, which is what we're interested in. This can be affected as well, particularly if we've got a very long straight with no real corners between the last major corner on the track and the pit entry. There's a lot more time for those temperatures to stabilize and normalize. So the optimal way, and we will be fitting this to our Racecraft car fairly shortly, is to use an IR or infrared. Let's hope it's a little more robust than some other things we've managed to break around here. Infrared Tyre Temp sensor. So what we do with this is we basically mount it on the car so that it is pointing at the tyre tread. And what this does is it gives us a beam. I think it's about 120 degree field of view. And across that field of view, it gives us 16 channels of the temperature on the tread of the tyre. So we're going to have one of these mounted on each corner of the car pointing at the tyre. As you could probably figure out. This gets a little bit tricky on the front because the front tyres actually do turn. So there's a little bit of a compromise there, getting that data and making sure that our mounting is still relatively straightforward. So what that looks like, let's just head back across to my laptop, and if you want to have a look at this in your leisure, then head across to Izzy Racing's YouTube channel. But this is the sort of data visually represented that we are getting here. So straight away you can see the temperature build up in the tyres as the car is cornering hard, and just at the same time you can see once the car is off a corner how quickly those temperatures normalize. So it's going to be quite interesting. We're going to be using that data in conjunction with the Alfano tyre pyrometer back in the pits to correlate that data, bringing some more interesting information out to our Racecraft customers. Alright, so I just want to talk about that Racecraft course that we have just released. It's been out for a little under a week now, maybe right on a week now, and it's already been seeing quite a great reception. We've sold, I think, over 300 of those courses to date so far, and we're really excited about getting more people on board. Obviously, when you're starting a completely fresh project like Racecraft, at the moment our forum in there is a bit of a ghost town. We know that that's going to build up over time. So I wanted to just show you what we've got going on at the moment. So the course that we've just released is our motorsport wheel alignment course. So I'm just going to show you a couple of bits from that course without going into too much detail here. So this is something that I know a lot of enthusiasts really struggle with, particularly if you're taking a car to the track maybe once every few months, or even if it's every second weekend and you're a pretty serious competitor. Wheel alignment can be something that really makes or breaks your session out on the track. However, most enthusiasts kind of have to leave their wheel alignment up to a wheel alignment specialist. The results you can get there can be pretty hit or miss. The other problem though, even if you've got the best person in the world doing your alignments, it's really hard to take the wheel alignment specialist along to the racetrack with you. So that means if you head to the racetrack, something's not quite right, you've got no way of making adjustments. If you head there with a dry setup on your car and it starts pouring with rain, you're going to be compromised because you're not going to be able to get off some of that camber and soften the car up and make it work well on a wet track. So the ultimate is if you can do this yourself, and again a lot of enthusiasts think that this is going to require thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Reality is no, it doesn't. It can be done quite cheaply using string wheel alignment. So that's what we've got here on the screenshot that I'm just showing you. So this is a smart string setup that I've got on the car. So we've got frames at the front of the cars, another one at the back. We've got this bar that you can see here supported by those frames, and the idea with those bars is that they are there to support strings. Now it might be a little bit tricky to see that string, but basically it's running down the side of the car, and then we've got another one running down the other side of the car. The key with this is because those bars front and rear are exactly the same, they've got little machined grooves in them, we can make sure that those two strings are perfectly parallel to each other. Once we've squared the strings up on the car, we can then measure between the string and the rear of the rim, and then the string and the front of the rim, and that will allow us to check our toe. So all can be done for a relatively modest investment. While that's a professional setup, you can literally do this with some aluminium extrusion, some fishing line, and 4 jack stands. It doesn't have to cost much at all. Moving on as well, another thing that we show in this course is how you can measure your caster. Now this does require some specialist equipment, in so much as you're going to need a camber caster bubble gauge, but you're going to need some way of measuring camber anyway, so that's not necessarily the end of the world. So with these camber caster gauges, basically you install that, and then you go through the process of turning the wheel out through 20 degrees. You can see in this shot here, we do have the car currently on some caster sweep plates, just to make that really easy. They have 20-degree markings, which we can see here, so you can be quite accurate with how much you turn the car. You don't need those though. You'll see that also on the camber caster bubble gauge, there are actually 20-degree markings machined onto the end of that, so it makes it quite easy. So the process is you turn the wheels out, you zero the bubble gauge, zero the caster, and then you turn the wheels back through the opposite way for 40 degrees, and then you'll be able to measure or read your caster straight off this bubble gauge. And the last thing I just want to show you here as well is bump steer measurement and adjustment of bump steer. Again, this is something, there are rigs available that are quite pricey. I think the last one I checked out was a touch under $1,000 for measuring bump steer. Again, you don't have to spend the earth on this sort of equipment, and basically what I show you in this module is how to do this with some components that I think total cost was about $50. We've got a piece of aluminium extrusion which is cable tied to the wheel. We've got a little laser pointer there. It's actually a laser distance measuring tool, but works perfectly for our purposes. We've got some graph paper that I'm just putting up there now. That's supported on a 90-degree bracket. Back in front of the car, which you can't see here, we've got a mirror supported. And the idea here is that that little laser is going to shine out onto the mirror, and then it's going to end up getting reflected back onto the graph paper. We've got the spring out of the coilover shock absorber in that corner of the car. We're going to move the wheel through its full bump and rebound travel, and then we're going to be able to see the results and measure the results. There we go, we've got it moving there, and we can see as well, hopefully you were able to see there's a little red dot from our laser marker. You see how much that moves there. So by marking that up in bump and rebound travel, then we can pull our piece of graph paper off, and hopefully, there we go. It gives us an indication of how much bump and rebound travel we've got. How much bump steer we've got in bump and rebound travel. Now, again, if you can see those numbers there, they measure 17 millimeters and 16 millimeters. Sounds really scary. The way that system works, we are basically multiplying the amount of actual bump steer we've got because of the distance from the wheel out to our mirror and then back to our graph paper. So in this case, I've set that up to be 10 times the diameter of our wheel. So basically, we need to divide those numbers by 10, 1.7 millimeters and 1.6 millimeters. Still heaps, but starts to sound a little bit more realistic. So again, we show you how to eliminate bump steer. So if you are interested in learning more about this course, you can head over to our racecrafthq.com website /courses, and that wheel alignment course is available now, $129. They also give you membership to our online community with our forums. So please feel free to check that out. In a minute, I'll also be talking about a giveaway that we're running that you can get into the draw for. Right, moving on, we have released our latest Tuesday video release. This was shot at Goodwood Festival of Speed. So this is Peter Solberg's World Rallycross Championship winning car, a Volkswagen Polo. So this actually started life as an old WRC rally car. Old's probably relative. I think it was a 2014 WRC chassis, and we go through the modifications made there to take a WRC winning car, a competitive WRC car, and turn it into something that can win World Rallycross. Talk about the differences there. One of the main ones there is the power levels of the car. In WRC, due to the size of the inlet restrictor on the turbocharger, they're somewhere around about 320 to 350 horsepower, depending who you talk to and what day of the week it is and how optimistic they're feeling at the time. With World Rallycross, much more power due to the larger 45mm restrictor. So these are running around about 600 horsepower. In itself, not that much. The bigger aspect is actually the massive amounts of torque that they make. So the way this works is, due to that restrictor, it limits the airflow, particularly at higher RPM. So we see the tuners are using a lot of boost down in the lower RPM range, probably from anywhere from about 3.5 through to about 5,000 RPM, maybe as much as 4 bar boost or more. Then once the RPM increases and the restrictor starts limiting flow, the boost drops down. There's a lot of information in this video. One of the interesting aspects that we focus on here is the use of the fresh air anti-lag system. It's something that we've started to see come up more and more in the aftermarket enthusiast market now. We've done a couple of little articles on this technology in the past, so definitely not new, but essentially what it does is it uses a valve, much like a wastegate, to introduce fresh air straight from the compressor outlet into the exhaust manifold, and coupled with some strategies in the ECU to dump additional fuel into the engine and retard timing, Basically that gives a very powerful anti-lag system, and the reason that this is used over or preferred over the usual technique of just cracking the throttle open and passing air and fuel through the car is using that technique. There's a limit to how aggressive you can set the anti-lag up before the car starts pushing heavily, which is where when the driver gets off the throttle the car continues to drive forward, so no engine braking, and that can be quite disconcerting for particularly novice drivers. So the fresh air anti-lag system allows a much more aggressive anti-lag strategy, talking to the engineers here, and the drivers off the throttle can still have in excess of 100,000 RPM turbo speed. That can equate to 3 bar or more positive boost pressure pre-throttle body. So that's all there when the driver cracks the throttle. And of course with World Rallycross being a situation where multiple cars are competing on track at the same time, getting the instant response when the driver's back on the throttle is absolutely critical. So head across and have a look at that video, and while you're there, if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please make sure you do so. Right, we've got 2 giveaways going at the moment for High Performance Academy. We are still finishing up our JE pistons giveaway, so any JE shelf stock piston, regardless whether you're looking at a 4-cylinder set or an 8-cylinder set, if you've got a popular engine that they support, which will be pretty much most popular engines, and you're looking at doing an engine build, then this is going to be perfect for you. As well as the JE pistons, which we will ship anywhere in the world, you're also going to get our suite of engine building courses, so you'll know exactly what to do with them. So I'll get the team to drop a link in the chat that you can follow if you want to get involved in that. And if you are interested in our Racecraft project, you want to learn how to do your own wheel alignments, we've got our very first giveaway running for that, and that giveaway is for a BG Racing string alignment system. So that's the frames for the front and back of the car, the string system itself, as well as a BG Racing digital camber gauge. So that's going to be perfect in conjunction with our Motorsport Wheel Alignment Fundamentals course to get you up to speed learning how to do your own alignments. Perfect for anyone who is interested in getting a little bit more serious on the track. You're also going to get 4 years access to our private members only community over there. So those 2 links, check them out. Also, if you aren't already following our Racecraft HQ Instagram account, please make sure you do so. It is just Racecraft HQ. Alright team, thanks for watching there. Give me a few moments and we'll get started with today's webinar.